Tight ends, you know them, you hate them, but you got to start them. We're going to talk about our tight end rankings, some players that we can be avoiding, some players that we can be targeting, and overall strategy at the position. Because specifically right now, where we're getting in those underdog best ball drafts, it is incredibly important to understand how to build around tight end, and if we should be going through and taking two of these guys in our draft, or maybe we need to wait until the later rounds and grab three of them. But before we get into it, you better be dropping a like on this video. You better be subscribed to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you play fantasy football, I promise you, you're going to love flockfantasy.com. Over there, you can find all of my fantasy football rankings. Not only all my fantasy football rankings, but all the premium content to all your favorite fantasy football creators. And when you sign up with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get 30% off any subscription. And on top of that, with promo code FLOCK, yours truly will go through and break down your fantasy football team with the podcast. But I think that should be about it. Let's go ahead and let's dive into these rankings. Starting off with Travis Kelce at 1. Now with Kelce, yes, this is a player that is going to be number one consensus for everybody. And with Travis Kelce, he is now more expensive in these drafts than where he's been over the past 2 seasons. And if y'all remember, if you've been members of the flock for long enough, Travis Kelce has been one of our top targets in round 1 of fantasy football drafts for years. Because 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even last year, people were saying, oh, Mason, you can't draft Travis Kelce, man. You know how old this guy is? This guy's going to be 32 this year. This guy's going to be 31 this year. This guy's going to be 33 this year. And we ignored him because this is a player that, one, does not miss football games. If you're looking at this, after year 1 in 2013, 16 games, 16 games, 16, 15, 16, 16, 15, 16, 17. It is ridiculous the availability that you have from Travis Kelce. And at the same time, he has shown absolutely no signs of slowing down if you're looking at his fantasy points from a per game perspective. Over the past 3 seasons, Travis Kelce has totaled 32 receiving touchdowns. It's obnoxious, and you're attached to the best quarterback in the NFL with Patrick Mahomes. But with all this being said, specifically this year, and I know this sounds crazy, people are going to hate me for saying it, but just like y'all made fun of me for drafting him over the past few seasons, you're allowed to make fun of me because I am not going to be drafting Travis Kelce this season. Right now, he's going around pick 4, pick 5, pick 6 in underdog drafts. And while I understand, yes, he has shown no signs of slowing down. I mean, the man's out there partying after winning the Super Bowl, which you would expect that a player of this caliber deserves to do. But at the same time, if we are being realistic with ourselves, this is a tight end that is turning 34. And yes, you shouldn't have been fading him when he was 31. You shouldn't have been fading him when he was 32. Yes, when you have that player that is just rolling, you continue to draft them and build around the elite position. But he's another year older. He's the most expensive he has been in years. It seems like people have honestly gone too far on the other end of the spectrum, where I think I'd probably rather grab an elite level wide receiver like give me Tyreek Hill, give me Cooper Kupp, honestly give me Stephon Diggs over Travis Kelce, because some of the other tight ends that we are going to have on this list are extreme values with where they're going. Now going over to 2, we will have Mark Andrews. Now with Andrews, very interesting spot, right? In that it seems like you should be a quality buy low candidate after a disappointing season last year. And honestly, at the beginning of the offseason, when there was a lot of uncertainty about Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, I was trying to target Mark Andrews as a cheap buy in dynasty formats. But since then, I really don't love what's happened in Baltimore for Mark Andrews. Now, Andrews has been a part of the lowest volume passing attack in the NFL over the past 4 to 5 seasons, but it hasn't mattered because Mark Andrews has been able to get to a target share of about 24% in his offense, and it's because you have nobody else there. Now, of course, hook 'em horns. You know I love my guy Devin Duvernay, but if Devin Duvernay is the other top option in your passing game, you're just going to be able to dominate targets week in and week out, which is what we've seen from Mark Andrews. Well, now this next season, while the Baltimore Ravens look like they're probably going to throw the ball a little bit more, I know everybody thinks Lamar is going to go out there to have 4,000 passing yards, 5,000, 6,000 passing yards. In reality, I don't expect this to be the highest volume passing attack in the NFL. You add in Odell Beckham Jr., Rashad Bateman healthy, and Zay Flowers, so the target competition will be at an all-time high for Mark Andrews in Baltimore. Now, yes, the overall passing volume may take a tick up in this offense with the new offensive coordinator, but still, I mean, I think that the market share comes down a bit, and I'm not drafting a lot of Mark Andrews in the middle of round 3 right now. Now, someone that I am drafting because he's been falling to round 5 is TJ Hawkinson here. Now with Hawkinson, this is a tight end stepping into his prime, about to get that second deal. And if you are looking at the historical trends of what you have with tight ends, historically, tight ends do not produce on their rookie contracts. I mean, it is an anomaly. It never happens to have a tight end go out there and dominate. And to be honest with you, I didn't expect TJ Hawkinson to produce after being traded to the Minnesota Vikings this past season. I mean, we looked at it and said, well, you know what, man? I mean, to implement a tight end in your offense, it's very difficult because at the end of the day, they have to learn how to be a blocker for you with your overall scheme and run routes. You have to learn essentially 2 different positions. You have to learn how to be an offensive lineman as well as a receiver. So generally, it takes a little more time to get accustomed to a different offense. He hit the ground running in Minnesota. We were completely wrong. The man was dominant. Starting in the playoffs, TJ Hawkinson against the Giants, 10 receptions, 11 targets, 129 receiving yards. If you're going through and looking at what you had with TJ Hawkinson, as soon as the Minnesota Vikings acquired him, 9 receptions, 7, 5, 5, 4, 6, 3, 13, 7, 1. With TJ Hawkinson, he immediately stepped in to be an ascending elite level tight end for the Minnesota Vikings. They depart from Adam Thielen. They bring in Jordan Addison, but not a lot of depth on this overall depth chart. I think that you probably have Hawkinson, Addison, Jefferson soaking up literally everything here. So, I mean, I think you have to be very excited about Hawkinson going into this next season. I'd rather draft round 5 TJ Hawkinson than round 3 Mark Andrews. Now, someone else that I've been drafting is George Kittle. And mainly it's just because with the dead zone that you have on Underdog, I feel like once you get outside of the early 5th round, once that tier of wide receivers dries up, it is difficult to go anywhere else in the late 5th round in Underdog drafts right now, other than grabbing a player like George Kittle. With Kittle, he won people Underdog drafts last season because some massive spike weeks. He is definitely going to be a better best ball player where you're not having to submit your starting lineup, and we're looking for some crazy upside on a week-to-week basis. He's going to be a little more inconsistent. The primary reason for this is just because there are so many weapons that you have there in San Francisco that it's difficult to sit here and say, yeah, he's 100% going to be the guy that's getting force-fed targets each and every week, but he has the big play potential where specifically on Underdog, round 5, I really like to target him there. And of course, if you're not drafting on Underdog yet, fix your life. You can find a link to Underdog Fantasy in the description of this video. When you sign up with promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And if you sign up for Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, you're also going to get all of my 2023 fantasy football rankings. Going to get a free trial to flockfantasy.com. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. But dropping down to our next tier, we're going to be looking at Kyle Pitts. Pitts has also been someone that I've been drafting a decent amount. Like, I honestly kind of would prefer drafting Kyle Pitts in round 6 than I would with Mark Andrews in round 3. And if you are looking at Kyle Pitts, a lot of people have short-term memory here. This is a tight end that was going in round 3 last year. This is a tight end that was the best tight end prospect of all time. I wasn't drafting him as a rookie because there's a rule. You don't draft rookie tight ends. In year 2, the Atlanta Falcons passing offense was abysmal, to the point where they were a bottom 5 passing offense since the year 2010. I mean, yeah, Chicago was worse than them, so it kind of covered up how bad the Atlanta Falcons passing volume was. But if you are looking at Kyle Pitts and his market share numbers that you had in Atlanta, this is still a player that showed that top-end talent. So if we're looking at the best tight end prospect of all time, the best tight end rookie season since Mike Ditka, good market share numbers in year 2, and a player that is currently younger than Zay Flowers, I'm in on Kyle Pitts. Okay, I'm fine drafting him as that bounce back option. Obviously, the offense is going to be very bad, but the other guy in this tier is a part of a good offense. Yeah, Dallas Goedert. With Goedert, he has increased his receiving yards on a per game basis every single year of his NFL career. And with Dallas Goedert, the main thing that you need to be excited about is how good this Philadelphia Eagles offense will be overall. The reason I'm not going to have him ahead of Kyle Pitts, however, is because with Kyle Pitts, it's possible he leads the team in targets. It's possible he's the number 1 weapon there in the passing game. With Goddard, it's never going to happen, right? You have A.J. Brown in his prime. You have Devonta Smith stepping into his prime. So you do have Dallas Goedert as the 3rd option in this offense that does want to be very run heavy. Still love Goddard, but I am going to have Pitts higher just because I perceive a higher ceiling there. Now, our next tier, we're going to be looking at Darren Waller. with Darren Waller, yes, a tight end that has a significant fall off this past season. And the main reason being is obviously injuries. But on top of that, you had Davante Adams coming over. And this was the first time that Darren Waller had to deal with top level competition in his offense. Historically speaking, why Darren Waller has been a phenomenal option in fantasy is because he's been on a ton of Raiders rosters that have literally nothing at wide receiver, where it's Darren Waller and then a bunch of bums. So Waller's able to go out there and get about 9 targets per game. Of course, that will change when Davante Adams comes over. But now you have him going over to the New York Giants, where it's a similar situation to what you had with Darren Waller 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when he was that top end option in fantasy. Now, it's difficult to say, yeah, Darren Waller's right back to being a top 3 tight end in fantasy. Obviously, he has declined. Obviously, this is an older player as well. So naturally, you have to assume that there is some risk here. But I mean, it's a nice price. We're getting Darren Waller in drafts right now. I'm completely fine having him there. But one of my most drafted tight ends so far is actually going to be David Njoku. We are higher than consensus on Njoku. He has an ADP behind Evan Ingram, who's directly behind him in our rankings. Now, I will be honest, both these players are incredibly similar to me. The reason I'm targeting David Njoku is more so I actually prefer the price point that you're getting with Deshaun Watson in drafts this season. With Njoku and Ingram, they were both 2017 drafted tight ends. With Njoku, he was incredibly young coming out of Miami, a top-level prospect, and he was seen as a long-term project. And you have seen flashes from David Njoku, but the overall thing that has held him back is just being a part of the Cleveland Browns offense, where it's very difficult to be too excited about anybody individually. But I do think that Deshaun Watson is going to elevate this overall offense this next year. So in underdog drafts right now, I love grabbing Deshaun Watson round 8, David Njoku round 9. And then if we are looking at a Trevor Lawrence build, completely fine with Evan Ingram here. The issue with Evan Ingram and why you can't necessarily assume that he's just going to repeat what he did a year ago is you do have Calvin Ridley coming over, right? So yes, Evan Ingram at the end of last season was an elite fantasy option at the tight end position, which is crazy to say, but you just have significantly more target competition there this next year. And then Pat Freiermuth at 10 is going to be my guy. Okay. I want y'all to think of Flock Fantasy and go, okay, yeah, Mason's higher than Trey Lance than everybody else. Trey Lance ADP quarterback 24. I have him quarterback 16. And I also want to think Mason higher on Pat Freiermuth than anybody else. Because if you were looking at Freiermuth, going back to what we're discussing, year 1 tight ends don't produce. Year 2 tight ends don't produce. But if we're looking at what you had from Freiermuth in the first 2 years of his NFL career, it is right in line with what we had in other tight ends like Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, George Kittle, Jimmy Graham, Jordan Reed, Jeremy Shockey. It is only elite level options on that list next to Pat Freiermuth for production through the first 2 years of their NFL career. I'm betting on this guy heavily going into year 3, even if the offense isn't great. Now, dropping down to our next tier, Dalton Schultz is really hard to know exactly what to expect, right? Like Schultz has been better than this in fantasy football over the past few seasons, but you're changing offenses with Dalton Schultz. I think a lot of people, including myself, don't necessarily see him as a great talent. I think his production and his success over the past few seasons was more so dependent on the actual situation that he found himself in Dallas. I don't know if he's going to be able to replicate it, but I mean, we can be honest here and say, well, there's not much target competition at all that he's going to have for the Houston Texans. It's really just, can you go out there and can you get a 15 to 16 to 17% target share in a different offense? Greg Dulcich at 12 is someone that I've surprisingly been drafting a decent amount of as well. Like if you're looking at underdog drafts right now and the other running backs, wide receivers that are going next to him, like honestly, they're gross options. So what I find myself doing a lot in these underdog drafts, I mean, y'all know we were saying we are avoiding Travis Kelce round 1 this year with where he's going. And instead, this is the season to be waiting until you're looking at guys like Greg Dulcich. I mean, the year 2 tight end in Tennessee. I mean, can we please just throw up some screenshots of the guys being drafted around them right now? And in my mind, if you're looking at the range of outcomes for these tight ends going into year 2 after impressive rookie seasons, I actually really like what you have here for both tight ends at cost. Now, our next guy is going to be Dalton Kincaid. Yes, we are lower on Dalton Kincaid than most people. Dalton Kincaid has an ADP of about tight end 10, tight end 11, depending on the draft that you were in. And I understand a lot of people are sitting here going, oh my gosh, he's the slot wide receiver for Josh Allen. Well, historically speaking, year 1 tight ends do not produce. If you go and look at the hit rates that Zach put out on flockfantasy.com with this article, you will see that these rookie tight ends historically speaking, have been very, very bad bets. That's why we weren't drafting Kyle Pitts year one. I'm not going to be drafting Dalton Kincaid, even if the situation looks phenomenal. I'm sorry. The data is there. History tells us to be fading these guys, especially if you're getting drafted as a top 10 tight end as a rookie. I don't see why we would do that. 15, we're going to go Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet, very young as well. And what's very weird about Kmet is if you were looking at his market share numbers through the first 3 years of his NFL career, they really haven't changed. Like with Cole Kmet, you saw the massive drop in production this past season. But if you're looking at the percentage of the Chicago Bears passing offense that he accounted for, it was about what we've come to expect with Cole Kmet. Now, the primary issue, of course, is that the Chicago Bears had the worst passing offense in the entire NFL last season. It was the worst passing offense since 2010. So it didn't really matter what Cole Kmet did. You were put in a situation where you were never going to produce. So if you think the Chicago Bears passing offense can significantly improve this next season, like if you draft Justin Fields in round 4, I think Kmet still has talent at the tight end position. Now, Higbee at 16, I understand the man doesn't really score touchdowns, but you have Cooper Kupp in Los Angeles and then nobody else. I understand, yes, Kupp is going to be able to go out there and get 30% of this passing offense, but still, I think Higbee could yet again be number 2 in this offense in terms of his overall targets. And if you see some positive touchdown regression, you could get a massive spike week from Tyler Higbee. Now, the issue is, historically, Tyler Higbee does not score touchdowns. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we're going to go Hayden Hurst at 17. Now, Hayden Hurst and Dalton Schultz seem very similar, right? I mean, both these tight ends are options where you have rookie quarterbacks where it's very difficult to sit here and figure out what we are going to have in terms of the passing volume and the actual talent profile of the player. The reason I'm going to go Schultz over Hayden Hurst is just because over the past few seasons, I mean, we've seen more production coming from Dalton Schultz than Hayden Hurst. And obviously, Hurst has been on a multitude of different offenses. I really don't know the right thing to do here. I do think that Hayden Hurst is a great pick at ADP. And Irv Smith Jr. as our next guy is in a great situation going over to Cincinnati where you have a great passing offense. And at the same time, you have no tight end there that's really going to contend for targets. Now, the issue with Irv Smith Jr. is we just simply have not seen him go out there and be productive at any point of his NFL career. He was drafted at an incredibly early age out of Alabama. I don't know. He's moving up these drafts at this point. It's just so hard to know what you're going to get with Irv Smith Jr. Hard to know what you're going to get with really any of these guys, right? I mean, we have Gerald Everett after this. If you are looking at Gerald Everett, an option that, yeah, drew a decent amount of targets this past season in Los Angeles. But at the same time, I mean, hell, you had Keenan Allen going down for a stretch. You had Mike Williams going down for a stretch. Now you have Quentin Johnston coming in. So you actually have some more target competition in Los Angeles. You are attached to Herbert, though. And then our last guy, we're going to have Juwan Johnson. So they added Foss Moreau. You also, of course, at the same time, are going to have to deal with what you get from Taysom freaking Hill. If Taysom Hill was not here, I feel like it would be so much easier to go through and draft these New Orleans Saints players. But with Taysom Hill and the threat that he can vulture touchdowns at the goal line at any point, it is difficult to be too excited about Juwan Johnson. But you don't have too much competition in terms of what you have at wide receiver, right? You have Chris Olave, and that's about it. But I think that's all I have for y'all. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you go down there, drop a like on it, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to get access to all of my Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings, if you want to get access to all my 2023 rankings, find all of that on flockfantasy.com. And if you want to get free access to flockfantasy.com and get in some fantasy football drafts with us today, you can always do that by using promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. You'll find both links down there in the description. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day and really hope we get to see you with the live stream later today.